Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're playing, I believe it's the second or third place Gonda, I'm not sure how they pronounce that. Anyway, it is Cocytus Portal. I believe it was actually second place now that I think about it, and it was a pretty impressive deck list honestly, and does a fairly nice job. So we're going to get right into it and check this deck out. So this deck can work well in one of two ways most of the time, and typically you're either going to go for Des and throw Cocytus cards into your deck, or you're going to have Cocytus just as a big turn 9 play and flood your deck with Cocytus cards, setting up some draw power with artifacts and so on. Most of the time I think I prefer to favour the Des X line of play, as it just does feel like a much better way to do things. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to do it, and it definitely doesn't make it the only optimal play. And there is White Worm, not a bad option, but Substitution will at least kill that. So this match was reasonably one-sided, I would say. I definitely took the initiative in this matchup, which was exactly what I was aiming for, taking as much of the early game as I kind of could, so that I could set up for a very nice line of play later on, making sure I have enough artifacts and so on. And making it hard for them to just absolutely wipe my board was very important. Genesis of Legend. I've seen a lot of Dragon decks lately teching that card in. Mainly to deal with, of course, big drops, which makes sense. Especially for mirror matches, that could be a really one-sided card. So, going for the Evolve on the Analyzing Artifact, because it does both get a decent amount more health, and it's of course going to be a draw card, so if they have to target it, it does mean we're at least going to get the draw off it. Now if it was me, I would probably have Evo'd that, which they of course did, as it's going to be a good way to go 2 for 1 pretty easily. Although it does mean they are leaving up the 4-3, so maybe not beneficial for them there. Now it's just really a matter of taking, of course, control of this board. Being able to wipe out whatever we can, so that we can survive long term. So I threw as much in my deck as I could, before throwing down, of course, Miriam as the Diabolic form, just to kind of get us that extra draw. And unfortunately, we didn't have one slot free that I could have used to go for an Acceleratium into Analyzing, but we wouldn't have had enough points anyway, so at this stage we're just holding on to the Analyzing and going for as much damage as we could as we set up for a decent lethal turn. Now opponent did a pretty decent job here. I mean, they're going to be able to wipe out 3 of these 4 cards now. For what's actually left on the board anyway. And all I've really got to do is play Omen of Destruction. I don't have many other plays to go with this, and really that's the only good option left. It's really going to be much trickier from here, because I don't have many options to play into. All I can do now is survive a couple of turns as best I kind of can. Unfortunately, this does cripple us a little bit. We do only need 4 damage though, so we definitely don't need much. We had a decent chance of getting what we needed, but unfortunately didn't manage it. I would have much preferred to get our Radiant Artifact. It would have actually won us the game, which is what I was aiming for here initially. That's why I went for the Analyzing play, as I knew it was going to be a safe bet if I could have got it. But unfortunately we didn't quite get there. And I did accidentally throw Ancient Artifacts instead of Radiance there. For some reason I thought Mystics weren't in this pick system, and I didn't really check enough when I was doing it. I just did it very quickly. So I could have had a better chance of getting a Radiant Artifact, which would have been obviously much better. So now I have to do pretty much everything I can to survive. And this isn't a bad option. We're going to go through a few cards, trade things off nicely, and still set ourselves up with a couple of damage here. And the Analyzing actually was a perfect draw, as it is going to allow us to kill the 1-1. And there it is, Prince of Cocytus, or Cocytus, whichever way you want to go. Definitely a card we want. As from here on out, it's really just a matter of who can I get lethal. as they've already gone for theirs, so their Cocytus is actually fairly decent. The biggest risk that they could have is Azeroth's Reckoning. If they manage to get that card, I am 100% screwed. Whereas if they don't manage to get that card, we have a chance, since we are going to get this draw. Scorn of Desire, not quite good enough. It's positive though. They went for the Hellbeast, which is perfect. That is going to kill them. Luckily, it wasn't Azeroth. Azeroth was the only card I was scared of out of everything that they had there. So unfortunately, the only games I did have were decent against Dragon mostly. Maybe since this was for a tournament desired setup, that this was actually one of the matchups that it was reasonably favoured against, as Rune I didn't find it particularly great against, whereas Dragon was fairly decent to go up against with this deck. Since these probably aren't ladder optimized decks, so whether I'd recommend them for ladder play, probably not. As far as the tournament went, it definitely performed pretty well. Of course, there will probably be a big shake-up before then. Before any more tournaments, after all. I mean, the SEO region only had a couple days of prep, so not many people actually got time to do massive amounts of preparation work for any kind of meta shift. I mean, Forest actually saw a fair bit of play in the tournament, surprisingly, and actually had a few top lists. It was actually the third most played in the top 8, which is pretty impressive. So there's not much we need to do in this matchup right now, at least from what we have. All we can really do is maintain what we've got. And I probably could have actually went for the substitution play. Did decide against it. Didn't really have a big need to go for it. At least not at this point. Excalibur. With that Evo going for the Dragon Sword, of course. Well, they wipe the board. At least substitution should be fairly reasonable. Going forward, we're going to have some okay plays, I think. It's just a matter of being able to get to them. That's really the only issue I've got left now. Like, Deus Ex Machina is actually going to be a fairly decent play, which is probably exactly what I should go for next turn. I believe I avoid Deus Ex Machina next turn, but it's probably what I should have went for. I did, of course, end up drawing one of the Cocytus. I've also got to remember that this deck actually runs 2 of those, so discarding 1 actually isn't as big a deal as you'd think with Deus Ex. If I had kept that in mind more often, I think I could have won probably some of the more difficult matchups I was having against Rune. Because I wouldn't have been holding on to a hand that I could have probably had better cards for. Nothing too impressive there, unfortunately. Not really a lot I can do. I need to be able to wipe out as much as I can here. And I did decide to, of course, use the Prince in the best way I could by throwing cards into my deck for this match, instead of going for the whole big Prince play. And it turned out to be okay. I mean, we got the Wraithful, which is actually quite decent. We do have to deal with this Poseidon now, though, which is not a fun card to have to deal with any deck, but at least this one has a fairly decent way to do so. So we're probably going to wipe this out completely, I think. It's just a matter of coming up with an optimal line of play to do it. So starting us off, not too bad. If I had done some decent trading, I probably could have done just slightly better. But I think we did okay, considering. It would have been nice to have that Infernal Surge a little sooner, though. Getting some more cards would have been really nice. And now it's just a matter of, hey, let's flood our hand and flood our board at the same time. No need to really discard too much at this point. We've got quite a nice board. We've got a hand that will allow us to handle some things, and keeping the Excel could be quite handy. But now we do have to deal with a second Poseidon back to back. Definitely not the hardest thing in the world with what we currently have. Radiant. I think I probably honestly could have went for lethal there, yeah. If I had have actually used the Evo on the Radiant, I actually would have had game. Unfortunately, completely neglected that, focusing to kill the Poseidon, which is a little disappointing, but they did end up conceding immediately anyway, so really didn't waste any time there. It was pretty much the same as if I had have won. And being able to recognize that line of play, I think, was much more important overall. Being able to notice that we would have had lethal anyway in that replay there. At the time, of course, it wasn't much of a benefit, but just then it was quite decent. So definitely a deck that has some potential. I think it's got a little higher learning curve compared to a lot of other decks at the moment. At least trying to make sure you know your lines of play, you know what to expect, you know what you've got. Very important to know those things, and I haven't had enough time with this deck to give it a full-on inclusive look. And I think overall, if the guy who was playing this deck in the tournament played with it a lot, he would definitely understand those in and outs a lot better than I would. So I could definitely see why he plays so well. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. We will put the deck list in the description below. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time, see ya.